Hello Internet, welcome to Lex Universe. This video will be a little bit different from what you're used to in this channel. Today I'm welcoming here the former Czech Foreign Minister Tomáš Petříček, and he will talk about the repatriation efforts in March 2020, because I think it's a very interesting topic, and it would be really great to see it from the perspective of someone who was directly involved and who was responsible for this operation to go as smoothly as possible. So stay tuned for that. Let me show you my intro and let's go. And today I would like to welcome here a very honored guest, the former Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic, Tomáš Petříček. Welcome and thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, it's a pleasure.
Today we will talk about kind of a interesting operation that took place 1.5 years ago, and that's the repatriation of Czech citizens, or maybe citizens in general, from abroad during March 2020, when almost all of the general aviation basically stopped overnight. But before we begin, could you shortly explain to my viewers what it actually is that the foreign minister does?
You have many tasks. First of all, you are serving your citizens. That's a role of any politician. And as a foreign minister, you represent your country globally. You serve your citizens that might be in troubles abroad, companies that would like to do business internationally. And you use diplomacy to solve potential conflicts, potential tensions. And you try to strengthen cooperation with your partners, with your friends, in order to benefit politically, in terms of security, and in terms of economy, your country.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it has to be a very interesting profession. Okay, so let's move to the COVID time. Like, to be honest, I was kind of naive in March, because even on the 10th of March, I bought flight tickets to Vietnam for May, which now seems really dumb. So when was the first time that you saw any signs that there will be a requirement of a state intervention for the stranded people abroad?
We realized suddenly that after the collapse of global aviation, there is no way to get citizens, people back from popular holiday destinations that are far, far away, like Dominican Republic, Thailand, and many others. And it was mid-March when we launched the whole operation, because there was no other option to get these people back. And as in some places the tensions started to grow, it was not only the question of getting the people back home from holidays or from business travel, but also to prevent that something in terms of their safety might happen. And more or less, it took us a month to get almost everybody who was in contact with our consular departments at our embassies back to Prague and to their families.
Thank you. And how many countries and people overall were involved? I mean, like the countries that you have to get the people from.
I'm not able to say how many people we assisted in getting back. What I can confirm is that it was the biggest repatriation operation in the history of Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have directly assisted through the flights and with buses more than 5,000 Czech citizens to get back home. We have also assisted citizens from other European Union member states. There was around 1,000 who used our flights and our buses as well. But there are much more who used our embassies to get on a last call option to find connection back home, who really used the hotline to find a way how to return back through remaining channels, remaining options. So it was probably about 20,000 people who in some way use the assistance of the ministry and especially my former colleagues from consulate department.
Must have been quite a busy month, right? Did you manage it on your own, or did you have to hire some short-term employees or someone?
We managed with MFA staff, with ministry staff. As I said, people, employees work really hard, especially consulates were busy 24/7. We also use volunteers from other sections to assist them. But I'm glad that we managed to be really swift and to react on a changing situation, and we'll try to get the best service to people who got in trouble abroad.
I was actually wondering how the preparation of the whole operation worked. Did you have to draw it all up from the scratch, or was there any official procedure what to do in case someone got stranded somewhere? And also you said that or that you helped also some other Europeans to get back to Europe. Was there any like trans-European effort to somehow work together to get these people, or was it just your offer and they said yes?
It was, I have to admit, there was no manual for operation of this scale. We have been used to assist with repatriation in individual cases in the past, or in some situation that concerned one country probably. But the global scale probably took everybody by surprise, not only the colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, myself, but it took by surprise everybody in Europe, I would say. We approached the whole operation on a basis of acute need. We knew that from some places there was no option for Czech citizens to use any existing flights because, for example, from Latin America, from places like Philippines or Australia, very soon it was impossible to get out. And we relatively swiftly started to organize flights in cooperation with airline operators from Czech Republic or even from the destination where the people were. On European cooperation, I would say that from the beginning, it was great that we were able to coordinate our efforts. It was discussed many times in the spring weeks, and especially with our neighbors, we assisted each other. A part of people using flights that has been organized by the Czech ministry, we managed also to get many, I would say dozens of people back home via Austrian flights, via flights organized by our partners in Hungary, in Poland, or in Slovakia. And as we did the same for their citizens, we try to use our capacities as effectively as possible. As well, we needed to look at the budget because we needed from the beginning to organize everything with efficiency in mind.
It was actually going to be my next question. What were the costs? I mean, the overall cost of the whole operation, but also for the people when you took them home by some governmental special or some plane that you sent. Did they have to pay for it, or was it just for free?
We discussed in detail the question of costs from the very beginning, because we tried not to use public taxpayers' money, but very soon we realized that it would be very complicated from an administrative point of view to try to collect the money from people, as they are probably stranded somewhere without any cash left. So we decided to organize the flights for free, with one exception, the flight from Australia and New Zealand, because of the enormous cost of this flight. However, we managed, as we also assisted with repatriation of EU citizens, to have most of the costs reimbursed by the European Union, which also supported member states to not only focus on getting back their own citizens, but all Europeans. And out of some 100 million crowns, the Czech taxpayers' money was one quarter, about 30 million. The rest was paid by the European Union.
Actually, it doesn't sound like such a large number after all the expenses that we had to pay in regards with the pandemic for the past year and a half.
On the other hand, we received also some critical comments why we are getting people from holidays and we are organizing for them the flights, and we pay for that. But there was no other option, and frankly, we saw that some countries that decided that they would like to collect some fees for getting on board would have more troubles with that, and the repatriation took longer, and probably was even the cost was even with this cost we paid for.
Now, what did it actually look like? So I'm a citizen, I'm stranded somewhere in Thailand. I have to contact the embassy, and then you offer me some flight, or did you know who was where and you contacted them directly?
First of all, I would once again repeat that it's great when you are traveling abroad to register in our system, so that we know about Czech tourists abroad. This is a first note about somebody is abroad. If there is a problem, we can get in touch with him or her. In case you are in a complicated situation, if in case you get in troubles abroad, the first step is to try to contact a Czech embassy, Czech consulate. If there is no Czech embassy in the country, look at who is in charge of your destination. Because, for example, we don't have embassy in countries like Dominican Republic, which is a popular tourist destination. However, we have embassy next door in Cuba, and from Havana, we helped our citizens in Dominican Republic. We are usually trying to find a way how to get the citizens back home via remaining existing flights or with assistance of other countries. And as we saw that in some places there was no other option, then we started to organize repatriation flights and try to get all people in the territory on board.
I can imagine that from the Southeastern Asia it was a lot easier, because I believe that Qatar Airways was flying almost the entirety of March and maybe even April, so there was this possibility. But when you already sent the special plane, was it always like one plane to one country, or did you send more planes to one country in some cases?
It depended on number of tourists or number of people in individual destinations. In some cases, we were able to fill in the whole plane. For example, we took Czech tourists, Czech citizens from Thailand, but we had to operate two flights. While, for example, from some Latin American countries, we managed to get on board people from Colombia, from Panama, from Peru, and try to get them on single flight, so that we also reduce the cost and we fly full back home. So it was case by case, and it was always based on the number of people who got stuck in individual countries.
And when you say that you sent 2 planes to Thailand, could the people choose which plane they want to be on, or did you just give them the one flight and this one you have to fly?
Look, I believe that at the end of the day, everybody was happy that he or she was able to get back home, and we had some funny stories from last spring, while, for example, trying to get people from Southeast Asia. We also repatriated musical instruments. We had requests for repatriating domestic animals, pets back home. So there was some funny stories around the whole repatriation. But I also noted, look, we are not a travel agency. We are trying to get you back home, and we are doing maximum for that. But we are not here to see whether the weather forecast is nice and you would like to stay one more day on the beach.
Actually, I think my friend was in Rome at the time, and he had a dog, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't bring him on one of the repatriation buses, because he couldn't bring it with him.
It really was case by case. We managed, for example, to repatriate, if I'm right, one dog from Balkans.
Oh.
But it was because there was some free space, some free places in free seats in the bus. But obviously, the buses were to get people, especially, for example, students from United Kingdom back home after the borders got closed. However, I need to add that the repatriation operation was not only about organizing the flights or buses. It was very often about even finding an agreement that the airspace will be opened by a specific country, because many countries locked down themselves fully, so that even international flights are not able to come.
I can imagine that there were also some lockdowns in place in the destination, so it didn't have to be easy to get to the airport. If, for example, you are in Phuket and you need to fly from Bangkok, it's quite far away, I guess.
Indeed, it was a big challenge, especially in some places like Philippines or Indonesia, to get everybody at the airport. And actually in Philippines, we at the end have had some people who stayed much longer than they probably wanted, because we were not able to negotiate that individual islands would be opened, for example, for ferries to get and collect tourists. It was a problem we faced as European countries, and we tried to use diplomatic channels to persuade locals so that they help us. But in some cases, we were not successful.
Then moving on in time, there was this travel ban declared by President Trump in April, I think, that basically banned any travel between the Schengen area and the United States. And that was, I think, declared like overnight, or with very little heads up. Did you deal with that somehow, or were these people just left to themselves?
We organized one flight from the United States as well. We also have help from our Slovak colleagues who organized one flight too. So we try to get for the humanitarian reasons people who were not able to stay any longer, especially because some of them had only a short-term visa and they had to leave the United States. But in reality, there was still a couple of options to fly over Atlantic, and many residents, Czech citizens who reside in the United States, who work there and needed to get back home, use these options as well. So we tried to communicate with all people who were in touch with our consulates and embassy to find them options how to get back. But the surprise decision to more or less close the borders were only adding to complications.
It's actually one other question that I wanted to ask. Did you get all these information in advance, or did you learn it like everyone else from the news? I mean, about these restrictions from other countries?
We usually receive the information about measures applied in individual countries from our embassies. So we try to get them in advance. But in some cases, unfortunately, we learned about surprise decisions that affected Czech citizens, that affected traveling only after they were publicly announced. So in some cases, it was a lack of communication that only added to probably chaos that took the whole world by surprise last spring.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't look that it improved that much.
I would say that predictability is not yet to its maximum for sure. Many decisions are taken with 1, 2, 3 days advance, and certainly it is very difficult still to plan any international traveling.
So whenever we read about the last year, one of the words that appears most as unprecedented, we already talked about that nothing on this scale has ever been done before, but were there some other cases of needed repatriation of our citizens in the past? I mean, for example, the eruption of the Icelandic volcano maybe comes to mind, or 9/11 is kind of in the past, but has anything similar on a much smaller scales maybe, but happened before?
I'm not aware about any repatriation of not of a scale, but of like numbers of tourists or people that were in need to get back. I'm not really aware that there would be, for example, a flight organized from a country after some nature disaster, or in a case of potential, for example, violent conflict or something like that. It was usually case by case that we work with the people who were in a country that we recommended to leave immediately, for example, because of incidents or violence that took place there. And usually we manage to get them safely home.
Now, let's move to the future. This pandemic has kind of struck the European Union more than I could ever imagine, because of course these border closures are not only the case of faraway countries, but one of the most eerie things that I remember from the spring was going to my parents' village, which is located directly on the Polish border, and seeing all the roadblocks there and soldiers guarding the borders. Do you think the European Union will change, or that it will over time get back to what we are used to the freedom of movement whenever you go? Because right now, even for the vaccinated people, they still have to go through the border checks and still have to fill out some forms. Do you think this will disappear over time?
I'm convinced that we will return back to normal Schengen life and traveling. I'm not sure when it will be. It seems that this autumn will still bring new complications, possible restrictions, as we see already now, even during the summer, that vaccination vaccination process is undergoing across Europe, and yet we are hardening some of the restrictions for traveling. We are used to Schengen as a zone where you can travel freely, and it is not only because of some Euro weekend or weekend in Paris or in Venice or elsewhere, but because it is a fundamental right of every European citizen. And if we discussed a lot about repatriating largely tourists over the past 15, 16 months, I believe there are groups of people that were much more affected than tourism. People who were dependent on ability to go to Germany, to Austria for work. Companies that had a lot of business abroad and mostly used to go there without any hesitation or thinking about what am I to fulfill. Now the world has changed, was up and down, and this is something that that affected a lot of people for much longer than tourism. Students and many others who doesn't enjoy freedoms that Schengen brought us only because of some joy, but because it's their everyday bread.
Now that's speaking of Europe, but as we can see, then the vaccination progress in the rest of the world is even slower. Do you think that the traveling in the near future to outside Europe, let's say to Africa or Asia, will be easier than it was the year ago when it all started? Or do you think we are looking at a much longer time of it getting back to normal?
We all are giving a big hope that vaccination will, at the end of the day, help us probably not to return back to normal, but to create a new normal where traveling will be much easier than it is now. I'm not sure whether we will return back to mass tourism as we knew it before 2020, but certainly very essential for international connections to resume operation, because it's really complicated, for example, for business people to go abroad, to go and meet their business partners, to do the business in areas like Africa or America, because it is really complicated to get there. And you can switch to online, but only partly.
That's true.
Mostly, I hear that it is okay. We can do part of our job online. We can certainly try to do our degree online, but it's taking a lot from the life of a student, for example, or life of international salesman. So you cannot do everything.
That's true. We have actually. I kind of admire you that you were able to do all this. You have to. I guess you had to do it remotely, all this repatriation progress that we were working remotely. I don't know if you were used to it, but when we in my company switched to it, it was a lot of outages, a lot of problems, and people didn't know how to use it. It was really challenging the first week, first month. So I can imagine how difficult it had to be to get thousands of people across half the world and work remotely doing that.
On the other hand, you work remotely with your colleagues at embassies, so the communication channels are working, and you have a mechanism for emergency situations. So it was possible to use it, even though the scale was enormous compared to for what we were probably planning, or we were not training, but thinking that might happen, and that we will need emergency mechanisms to be launched immediately. At the same time, I have to admit, public service and digitalization, it is a big topic yet. And it's true that it took several weeks before we were really capable of doing almost the same workload as before the pandemic.
That's true. I can say from my own experience, it's a struggle sometimes.
It is.
Now, we were talking about Czech citizens going abroad, but the other thing that got affected is the inbound tourism. When you walk Prague in 2021, it looked completely different from 2019. Do you think, how do you see all these efforts from the prime ministers or presidents from the southern European countries that are basically opening themselves to tourism, while Czech Republic, I think, was it wasn't allowed for many foreigners to come to the Czech Republic in the past year and a half, while, for example, Croatia allowed basically everyone who wanted. So which approach do you think is better, and do you think we will get back to over-tourism in Prague?
I'm not in a position to evaluate properly what was better, whether the Croatian way or Czech way or Japanese way, because at the end there are countries that are much harsher on tourism. More or less, you have still countries where it is not possible to go as a tourist, and we don't know whether, for example, it will be possible this autumn or winter. Now we are probably watching everybody Olympic Games in Japan, and many wanted to go there, and it is not possible. So I'm not sure whether we will return very somewhat quickly to what we were experiencing before pandemic in terms of tourism. In Prague and other popular tourist destinations, it might take some time before people start to trust again that the situation is safe enough for traveling abroad, that the risks, especially in terms of COVID, are not accessible to what you'll get from traveling abroad. But then the logic as well might be we should start at least within the European Union to see how to gradually reopen the society, because third wave of lockdowns would have enormous economic price, and service sector and tourism are sectors that have been heavily hit, and the question is whether another wave would only kill the whole sector.
It's true.
So I believe we will gradually return to tourism as we knew it. We might use also the experience to rethink some of the practices in this segment, because some of them were not sustainable for long, for sure.
I was also thinking about the global traveling. We are currently accepting vaccinated people who have been vaccinated by one of the vaccines that are approved by the EMA. But for example, China only accepts tourists who have been vaccinated by some of the Chinese vaccines. Do you think there will be any, let's say, agreement worldwide ever that everybody will accept every vaccine? Or if I want to travel, I should get one Sputnik, one Sinopharm, and so on?
I hope it will be the case. At the end of the day, the vaccine shouldn't be about politics. It should be about health protection. And for example, EMA is ready to register any vaccine that or any vaccine the producer provides all documents, full documentation in order to allow the authority to evaluate the risks of the vaccine, how it was developed, how it was tested. If Chinese producers apply, I believe EMA will duly consider the application.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope that the Chinese side will be as accepting.
It is a pity that vaccine is becoming part of the geopolitical struggle we are watching all around the world.
That's true, unfortunately. Now, moving on from COVID, you have recently finished as the Czech foreign minister. What are your plans for the future? Do you want to stay in politics, or?
I'm currently enjoying some free time with my family. I have a lot to repay to my kids. And after summer, I would like to return partly back to academia. I would like to have some courses at my alma mater, Charles University, and working in the expert community on issues I'm interested in, like climate change, resilience, international security, and foreign policy for sure. At the same time, I'm not leaving politics forever. I'm interested in public debate here in Czechia, but also in Europe, and I want to provide some sometimes provocative, progressive opportunities we can pick up as policy options.
Then I wish you good luck. Now, one bonus question in the end. I bought flight tickets to Tokyo for the end of September. Should I rebook?
I would suggest to start looking for the rebooking button. As we see now with Olympic Games, the travel restrictions Japanese government introduced, and these restrictions remain, are very strict, and we will see what will be after the Olympic Games, because there has been a public criticism that the risk concerning COVID spread due to the Olympic Games is big, and after them it might be that a strict reaction will come again.
I didn't want to hear that.
Not a positive but honest reply.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to thank you for joining me in this interview. It was a very interesting talk, and I wish you luck. And
same to you.
Thank you.
And let's hope that we will soon be able to catch a plane and go somewhere to see friends or see amazing places.
I hope so. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. All the best.
And now back to you. I hope you enjoyed this interview. I think it was really great. It gave me so much more information, so much more insight in what was going on in March of 2020. For sure, it was a really difficult time all around the world, and as you could see from the point of someone who was directly involved, it was a lot of work. So I will end this here. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, please give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel and ringing the notification bell so that you get an information about the new video every time I post it. Check out my other social media and, well, see you at the next video. Have a wonderful day.